What happens when the person you built your entire life around turns out to be watching you the whole time? When love, sacrifice, and devotion become the stage for the most intimate betrayal imaginable. Before we go any further, if you're drawn to stories that dig into the darkest corners of the human heart, make sure you subscribe to Roots of Revenge, like this video, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because this story doesn't just unfold, it cuts deep. I remember the first day I met her like it was burned into my memory. The smell of antiseptic in the rehabilitation center, the soft tap of her cane against the tiled floor, the way her eyes never quite focused but still seemed to search the room for something safer than air, and when she smiled at me, timid, uncertain, beautiful in a fragile way, I felt something shift inside my chest, like my life had just taken a turn I didn't know how to stop. And she told me her name, and then quietly, almost apologetically, that she was blind, had been since her teens. And I don't know why I said it, but I told her it didn't matter, that I'd describe the world to her if she wanted, that I'd be her eyes. And she laughed, a small laugh, like she didn't believe anyone would ever really do that. And somehow, that laugh became my purpose. We fell into each other fast, dangerously fast. The kind of love people warn you about but never escape. And I was there for everything, every step, every obstacle, every invisible edge she couldn't see coming. Guiding her hand down staircases, reading her menus at restaurants, describing sunsets in colors I exaggerated just to hear her gasp. And when we married, people called me a saint, said things like, "She's lucky to have you," and I wore that praise like armor, because loving her felt like a mission, like something I was meant to do. And for 3 years, I woke her up every morning, told her what the weather looked like, which clothes she was wearing, who was calling her phone, what expression people made when they spoke to her. And I never once questioned it, never once imagined that anything about our life could be untrue, because why would I? Who fakes blindness? Who builds an entire identity around darkness? And then there was that night, the night that split my life into before and after. When I came home early from work, keys still warm in my hand, the apartment quiet in a way that felt wrong, and I heard a sound that didn't belong, a soft rhythmic flick, like pages turning, and I stopped breathing, because I knew that sound, knew it better than my own heartbeat. And as I stepped closer, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to pretend I heard nothing, I saw her sitting on the couch, legs tucked beneath her, the lamp on beside her, on, bright, unnecessary. And in her hands was a book, held at a perfect distance, her eyes moving left to right, smooth, practiced, alive. And for a second my mind rejected it, tried to rewrite reality on the spot. But then she turned the page, and I felt something inside me collapse, not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a building giving up after years of hidden cracks, and I said her name, just once, and she looked up, really looked up, her eyes locking onto mine with clarity I had never seen before, and in that moment, the woman I loved disappeared, replaced by a stranger who had been living in my house, sleeping in my bed, listening to my every word while seeing every lie I told myself. The silence stretched until it hurt, until my ears rang, and finally I asked, my voice barely mine anymore, "How long?" And she closed the book gently, like this was an inconvenience, like I had interrupted something trivial. And she said, "You weren't supposed to find out like this, not, 'I'm sorry,' not 'please forgive me,' but that." And I felt rage crawl up my spine, followed by something worse, humiliation, because suddenly every memory twisted itself into something ugly. Every time I changed her clothes, every time I guided her hand, every time I spoke to her slowly, carefully, thinking I was protecting her, and she stood up, walked toward me without hesitation, no cane, no fear, and said she lost her sight temporarily years ago, and got it back before we even met. But she liked how people treated her when they thought she was blind, liked the safety, the control, the devotion, And when she realized how far I was willing to go, how much I would give, she decided not to stop me. Because love, in her words, felt better when it was unconditional. And I laughed then, a broken sound, because I finally understood. I wasn't her husband. I was her experiment, her shield, her audience. And as I backed away, heart pounding, mind racing, I realized this wasn't just a lie. It was a performance that had lasted 3 years. And the scariest part wasn't that she could see. It was that she had watched me the entire time, learning me, shaping me, while I never truly saw her at all. I didn't leave that night, not because I wasn't shattered enough to walk out, but because my legs refused to obey me, because every step away from her felt like stepping off the edge of something I'd spent years building. And she watched me with those fully seeing eyes I suddenly realized had memorized every weakness in my face. And she asked if we could talk, her voice calm, almost reasonable, like this was a misunderstanding between equals. And I remember thinking how unfair that calm was, how after 3 years of guiding her through darkness, I was the one stumbling now, blind with shock. And I asked her why. Why keep the lie going even after marriage, after vows, after promises whispered in the dark? And she told me the truth the way people do when they believe it justifies everything. They don't rush, they explain, they want to be understood. And she said the world is cruel to women, that vulnerability invites protection, that when people believe you're helpless, they don't question you, they don't expect betrayal. And she admitted that at first it was fear of losing safety, fear of losing control, but eventually it became curiosity, then power, then habit. And every word felt like a blade sliding slowly under my skin, because I realized she wasn't just confessing, she was dissecting me, analyzing my reactions in real time. And when I asked if she ever loved me, she paused just long enough to hurt, then said she loved what I gave her, loved the way I centered my entire life around her needs, loved how predictable my devotion was. And that pause echoed louder than any insult, because it told me everything I needed to know. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments that now felt poisoned, times she'd asked me to describe rooms she already knew, colors she'd already seen, faces she'd already memorized, and the humiliation burned worse than the anger. Because I wasn't just lied to, I was willingly reduced, sculpted into something useful, and the next morning, when she walked into the kitchen, confident, unassisted, making coffee without spilling a drop, I felt like I was watching an alternate version of reality bleed into mine, and she acted normal, asked if I wanted sugar, commented on the news playing on TV like she'd always been allowed to see it. And something inside me snapped, not loudly, but decisively. I started watching her the way she'd watched me, noting how easily she moved, how naturally she navigated space, how she avoided obstacles she claimed not to notice, and with every observation, the love I once felt curdled into something colder, sharper, because now I understood the imbalance. We hadn't been partners. We'd been predator and prey, even if she dressed it up as love. Friends came over that weekend, unaware of anything wrong, praising me again for being such a devoted husband, asking her how she managed so bravely, and I sat there listening as she performed blindness flawlessly, bumping into chairs on purpose, reaching for my arm at the exact moments that would draw sympathy, and I realized with sick clarity that she was good at this, terrifyingly good. And when our friends left, I confronted her again, demanded to know how long she planned to keep pretending, and she smiled, not cruelly, not apologetically, but confidently, and said, "As long as it works." And that was the moment I understood this wasn't a mistake she regretted. It was a strategy she perfected. The paranoia started after that. Quiet at first, then constant, because every time I left the room I wondered what she was doing when she thought I wasn't looking. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if she'd already read the message. Every time I spoke freely, I questioned who was really listening. and the apartment that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a stage where I was the only one unaware of the script. And late one night, unable to sleep, I pretended to be passed out on the couch, slowing my breath, stilling my body, and I heard her move, heard drawers open, heard her footsteps navigate the dark without hesitation. And when I cracked my eyes open just enough, I saw her standing over me, studying my face. Not with love, not with guilt, but with calculation, like she was checking to see if her disguise still worked. And in that moment, fear finally eclipsed heartbreak, because I realized the lie wasn't over. It was evolving, and I was still trapped inside it, except now she knew that I knew, and whatever came next wouldn't be an accident. The shift happened quietly, almost politely, the way storms do before they tear everything apart. And I began to understand that knowing the truth didn't give me power. It made me dangerous to her narrative, which meant I had to disappear or be controlled. And she chose control. She started reminding me, casually at first, of how people saw us, how everyone admired our story, how any sudden change would raise questions I wouldn't enjoy answering, and the way she said it, soft, almost caring, made it clear she wasn't threatening me. She was informing me, and I found myself trapped between exposing her and destroying my own life, because who would believe that the devoted husband had been fooled for years without noticing, without suspecting? She told me I'd benefited too, that my identity had become wrapped in being her protector, that people respected me, trusted me, opened doors for me because of the role I played. And as much as I hated hearing it, I couldn't deny the truth lurking beneath her words, and that realization made me feel complicit, like I'd helped build the cage I was now pacing inside. I tried to reclaim control in small ways, pulling back emotionally, refusing to guide her unless she asked, speaking less, observing more. But she noticed everything, adjusted faster, playing helpless only when others were around, competent when they weren't. And the double life exhausted me more than ignorance ever had. One evening, during a dinner with her sister, the conversation drifted to how strong our marriage was, how inspirational our love story sounded, and something inside me snapped again, sharper this time, and I said, "You know, she's stronger than anyone gives her credit for." And the room went quiet, her sister smiling politely, unsure what I meant, and my wife's hand tightened around my arm, nails digging just enough to warn me, and she laughed it off, redirecting the conversation with practiced ease. But later, behind closed doors, she asked if I was trying to ruin her, and for the first time, I didn't deny it. The arguments escalated after that, no longer about what she'd done, but about what I might do, and she began documenting things. My raised voice, my frustration, moments where I lost patience. And I realized she was building a counter-narrative, one where I was overwhelmed, unstable, cracking under the pressure of caregiving, and the thought chilled me more than her original lie. Because now I saw the endgame. If I spoke out, I wouldn't be the betrayed husband. I'd be the villain who abandoned a blind woman when it became too much. I started recording things myself, hiding my phone, capturing moments when she slipped, when she forgot to pretend, when her sight revealed itself in careless movements, but every recording felt insufficient, every angle incomplete, and the fear grew that even proof wouldn't save me from public perception. One night, during a heated argument, she said something that finally broke the last piece of me holding on to hope. She said she'd never forced me to stay, never asked me to sacrifice, that I'd chosen this role because it made me feel important, and I hated her for saying it, but I hated myself more because I couldn't fully deny it. Sleep became impossible. Food tasted like nothing, and the house felt smaller every day, walls closing in with each secret. And I began planning my exit not like a husband leaving a marriage, but like a witness escaping a crime scene, calculating timing, evidence, allies. The moment came unexpectedly during a charity event for disability awareness, a room full of cameras, donors, applause, and staged compassion where she was scheduled to speak. And as I watched her take the stage, cane in hand, voice trembling on cue, something settled inside me, a cold clarity, and I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every person she manipulated, every story she exploited, every truth she buried under performance. And as the lights blinded the audience and the applause swelled, I made a decision that would burn everything we'd built to the ground, even if it burned me with it. The room was silent in that fragile, electric way only truth can create, when it's finally spoken out loud. And as she finished her speech to thunderous applause, I stood up before I could talk myself out of it. Heart hammering so hard I thought the microphones might pick it up. And when I walked toward the stage, people smiled at me, assuming this was another tender moment in our inspirational story, the devoted husband supporting his blind wife. And for a brief second, I almost stopped, almost let the lie live another day. But then she looked at me, really looked, and I saw panic flash behind her eyes, and that was enough. I took the microphone from her gently, the way I used to guide her through doorways, and I told them everything, not angrily, not hysterically, but steadily, like someone who had finally found solid ground after years of darkness, and the words poured out about devotion mistaken for love, about sacrifice mistaken for truth, about how blindness had been a performance and how I had been the audience, and the gasps came in waves, followed by disbelief, confusion, then outrage. And she tried to interrupt, tried to laugh it off, but cameras were already zooming in, catching the way her eyes tracked the room, the way her body moved without hesitation. And when security escorted us backstage, the damage was already done. By morning, the internet had taken over where the stage left off, clips looping endlessly, experts arguing, strangers choosing sides, hashtags forming like battle lines, some calling me a hero, others calling me a monster. And her silence spoke louder than any denial, because the footage didn't lie, and neither did the people who came forward. Former friends, ex-co-workers, even a doctor who admitted she'd recovered her sight years ago but never corrected the narrative. The marriage ended quietly after that, paperwork replacing vows, and I moved out with nothing but a suitcase and a sense of self I had to rebuild from scratch, while she disappeared from public life. Her foundations dissolved, her image shattered, and the world moved on the way it always does, hungry for the next scandal. But I didn't move on easily, because betrayal like that rewires you, makes you question every kindness, every sacrifice, every version of yourself you once believed in. And some nights I still catch myself describing rooms out loud, out of habit, before realizing no one is listening anymore. The audience reaction was brutal, relentless, unforgiving, but also revealing. Because for every person who mocked me, there were dozens who admitted they'd ignored red flags in their own lives, who'd stayed in situations that felt wrong because the story looked right from the outside, and that, more than revenge, felt like meaning. Now, standing on the other side of it, I don't tell this story for sympathy. And I don't tell it for justice. I tell it because truth, even when it ruins you, is still the only way out of the dark. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. Was I right to expose her, or should some lies stay buried? Share your opinion in the comments because your voice matters here. And if you want more intense, cinematic stories of love, betrayal, and revenge, subscribe to Roots of Revenge, because this channel isn't about comfort, it's about the truth no one wants to face.